Hi, Misha here, and it's time to talk about, frankly, one of my favorite Star Wars ships, fighters, the ASF-01, or B-Wing. This was first seen in Return of the Jedi, and it was one of the largest starfighters. In fact, it was the largest one the Rebels had, and most heavily armed. This was either classified as a heavy Assault Starfighter or light bomber. It was also a long-range escort. And it was manufactured by a company, Slayn Korpil. Maybe best known for these over here. During the Clone War, they did the V-19 Torrent. And at the end of the Civil War, they also did the SF-01, so-called Star Fortress. Now, the V-19 Torrent was really the first fighter we see the Republic using. And it had a lot of moving parts, including the wings, which obviously could fold down. And it was a versatile craft. This tail could fold down too, but it's on its stand, so I can't fold it all the way. But you get the idea. It was versatile, but perhaps a little overly complicated and also a little challenging to fly. And when you look at the B-Wing, you kind of see a somewhat similar design aesthetic going on. It too uses S-foils, only 2 this time, so they controlled themselves a little better than with the V-19. But the problem is it also had this fancy rotating cockpit module. So, yeah, over-engineered it was. So this really came about right after the Battle of Yavin. After the loss of the Death Star, the Empire started fielding more anti-fighter fighters, or ships like the Lancer. So Admiral Akbar wanted to design something that could either go up against capital ships or escort rebel transports, or just be tough enough to endure fighting with what the Empire could throw at it. And he approached Slayn Korpil, and they kind of designed it all together. This is not a small craft. It's 17 meters tall. It is actually quite short. It's only about 4.5 meters long, and it's 2.5 meters with these folded in, and about 7.5 with S-foils fully extended. So when those are extended, typically the cockpit would rotate around. Why? I don't know, because it did. In the back, we have 4 engine ports. This actually could be fitted with one of 2 engine types. You could actually use a single engine from a light freighter and just use these 4 exhaust ports. Or it could use 4 smaller engines from Slayn Korpil. It still gave it a top speed of about 950 kilometers per hour, in atmosphere. So it wasn't the fastest in the world. In fact, it's kind of right in there with the Y-wing. But it has a lot going on. It has very strong armor, very strong shields. It has 2 launchers capable of holding 12 proton torpedoes or 8 heavy proton torpedoes. It has quite a wide sensor array and jamming array inside here. It does have a Class 2 hyperdrive, but since there's no astromech droid, it can only store 2 jumps in the computer. But it does have a full nav suite, and it is very modular. We have essentially 4 weapons hard points down here, on each wingtip, and with the cockpit. And they can be fitted with a wide range of items. Ion cannons, medium lasers, even a heavy laser, or even a dual repeating blaster. On top of that, it could have 3 targeting lasers integrated to help guide the proton bombs. It just basically had a lot going on, which makes sense considering how big it was. And if that's not enough, this cockpit could actually be ejected as a lifeboat, and even had a small thruster on the back to try to get the pilot down to a planet. It had provisions for up to a week and could carry 40 or 50 kilograms in cargo. Not much, but enough for a rucksack for the pilot. And it had gear. It could land on ships, and with these folded in, it was relatively compact. Long, but skinny, so if you could get it in the hangar, it didn't take up a ton of space. Or it could operate from a ground base. So the first of these, kind of pre-production, were available right before the Battle of Hoth in 3 ABY, and they're starting to produce them in larger numbers, but still by the Battle of Endor there were only a couple of B-Wing squadrons available. It was hoped this could fully replace the Y-Wing, but for various reasons it never fully did. Part of it was challenging to fly because of the spinny cockpit and just, all the moving parts and everything going on, and there was no astromech to kind of help out. Another part was it ended up being a little more intensive and on the maintenance and harder to work on than they'd originally hoped. But the flip side of that was that it was very adaptable and versatile. And that meant they could use whatever lasers the Rebellion could get their hands on, and even a few different engine types they could get their hands on. So you had options. They would continue to build these and field these into the New Republic era, and even up through the time of the Resistance. So it was mass-produced. It may not have been the pounding success they had hoped for, but it was far, far from a failure, and was a key part of the Rebellion fleet. Now this die-cast model or toy or whatever you'd like to call it, it was from the old titanium collection, and it's quite a bit metal. The main part is metal, with the wings and the part of the cockpit here being the plastic. There have been a lot of different B-Wings over the years, but this one's kind of neat because of the moving parts. In the real world, this was known as B-Fighter. A-Wing was A-Fighter in the production of Revenge of the Jedi, later Return of the Jedi. So when they named it B-Wing, it was after that, and they kind of went, well, it looks like a B. No, not really. It's also been known as the Blade Wing, which makes sense. The body does kind of look like a blade. Or the Bill Wing, after its primary designer. So they put a lot of work into this, but unfortunately, because of its shape and the blue screen technology of the time, a lot of the scenes of these fighting had to be cut because they just didn't turn out properly. So there weren't as many B-Wing elements in Return of the Jedi as they'd originally planned. But hey, they got to sell toys, right? And that's not a bad thing. And again, years later, we got the V-19 Torrent. And yeah, I can definitely see a bit of a resemblance here, if nothing else, with the whole attitude of big foldy wings and laser cannons on the wings. And these two are said to be challenging to fly. Not impossible, but, you know, maybe not the most intuitive. And maybe a little over-engineered. But that's what happens when you get a half-fish man and a company that seems to have German roots, thanks to their over-engineering together. But I do think it's one of the most creative starfighters in really all of science fiction, just because it's so asymmetrical. That's just not what you typically see. So it's neat for that, if nothing else. So what do you think? Do you like the B-Wing here? Let me know in the comments. And as always, I greatly appreciate you tuning in. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.